So in today's video, what I want to talk about is whether your company's year-end actually matters. Unlike being a sole trader where you're pretty much forced to have a March or 5th of April year-end, with limited companies, you actually have a lot of choice. Usually the default year-end that your company has is the end of the month that you incorporated. So if you incorporated in April, then your first year-end would be the end of the next April, the following year. That means the first year for your company is actually longer than 1 year technically, because you've got the rest of the April you incorporated plus 365 days to get to the end of April next year. However, that's not what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about today is actually if it matters when your company year end is. Should you make changes? Because you can change your year end, you can shorten your accounting period, you can lengthen your accounting period. So I just want to talk about the pros and cons. So the most common year end for limited companies in the UK, March, and you're probably not surprised to hear that. A lot of people want to align their company year to the tax year. That can have advantages, that can make doing your tax work a lot easier. However, the disadvantage of that is actually you can sometimes end up with less options when it comes to tax planning, especially if you've got director's loan issues, if you've got to exploit timing differences in terms of dividends. Actually, having a March year end isn't always the best thing to be able to achieve that. However, with that in mind, yeah, March is definitely the most common year end for a company. However, it's not always the most optimal from a tax planning point of view, but it is simple. It's the simplest year end as well because it's simple. So simple isn't always better. In this case, having a bit more flexibility because there's an offset between company year and tax year can be very valuable. So let's talk about the least common year end when it comes to companies. And the least common year end is actually November. So only about 3% of limited companies in the UK actually have a November year end. And the second least common is actually February. Sometimes it makes sense for your company to have a year end because you might have other companies that you have in your group or group of companies, and it can really be helpful if they've all got the same year end, especially when you're trying to manage intercompany transactions, when you're trying to plan for it. Sometimes businesses want to have it a year end, which essentially falls in a quiet period for them, because quite often when you're coming up to the year end, there's decisions that need to be made if you want to be tax efficient. If you want to get your accounts done early so you know what your tax bill is, you've got to get stuff ready. You don't necessarily want that happening when it's a busy period for your business. Quite often what will happen is a business will just look at what the quiet period in that year is and then pick a year end based on that. The extension of that is accountants have busy periods and quiet periods as well. So something like a November year end, actually a lot of your tax work will fall within that accountant's quiet period. So not only do you have more time to discuss your figures, so does your accountant. So that can be a bonus. To summarize this video, there isn't a right and wrong year end.